Welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, most viewed, underviewed podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. I'm of course your host, the beloved, the most charismatic man in entertainment. Beat that, Dwayne Johnson. I'm just kidding. I'm just trolling like usual. But it's been a busy week. And one of the coolest things about doing this podcast is I get to meet a lot of amazing people, a lot of interesting people, a lot of people who are putting in a lot of work in their career. So I'm excited about my next guest. And you might be wondering, who am I interviewing today? Who am I about to chat and have a great conversation with? Well, no need to fear. The most charismatic man is here to introduce him the proper way. He is a director, producer, and writer known for the women's sports drama EFC, which you can watch free on Tubi. Also, the Roku channel. You can stream it on Amazon, YouTube TV, movies. Go check that out. Amazing movie. It's one of those movies that I got to watch, and it's very exciting. And if you didn't get to watch it, go check it out. But it doesn't just stop there, because this movie alone has won over 30 awards, including Best Feature Film. And my guest I'm interviewing today, he won Best Director. He won the Best Director award at the 44th Paladino de Oro International Sports Film Festival in December. He's an amazing guy. He's an amazing talent, amazing director. Please help me introduce Canada's own Jaze.
Welcome. Thank you, Percy. That's quite the introduction there. That's you got me a little excited about myself, right?
This podcast. Look, that's not about doing anything average. I want to make sure that you feel special, you feel welcome, and people often think I'm the biggest thing walking on planet Earth, but it's actually my guest. It's you. So welcome to the podcast. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you and get to know you not only as a director and as a person, but to learn myself. Because I often say, when you're in a business like the entertainment industry, you never know everything. So let's get right into it, Jace. Because I could start off with how you got into directing. How did you get involved with the entertainment industry? But I want to start off with EFC, because it is one of your biggest works. And, as a fellow, entertainer, if you will, I always appreciate people who have put in the work, who have done amazing things. I want to, show a spotlight on that. So EFC, let's talk about that a little bit. How did you get involved with EFC?
Well, EFC is something I've been living with for probably the past, I'd like to say maybe 8 years, since the inception of the idea to actually do like a women's only MMA film. And one of the reasons why it was exciting back then just to think about doing something like this is because when you look at the list of like the top sports drama movies, like the top 100, you can even go down to, I think I went as far down as the top 300 movies. There was no women's mixed martial arts film at that time, and it kind of makes sense because women's. I don't know. Are you a mixed martial arts fan at all?
Absolutely, John Jones.
Okay, so you know where I'm going with this, right? For when UFC started in the 90s, it was like mayhem, and the women's side of it was a slow evolution. But something was happening around 2015, 2016. I think just the the perception was changing, I think, just around women in combat sports. And it just seemed like the right fusion at the right time. And even from a business perspective, we thought, okay, 6, 7 years from now, what are people going to be talking about, right? They're probably going to be talking about women's mixed martial arts. And it's been great just to look back to see when we had the concept or the idea, what happened after that, right? Because there's a few that came out, like Halle Berry came out with Bruised after we started talking about it, which we were really excited for her, right? To do that, and then we came out, and now you're starting to see like this movement now with women in these combat sports film, whether it's boxing or wrestling, right? So it's great looking back to see we were slightly ahead of the trend a bit. So, and again, I know we're going to talk a little bit about business here, but from a business perspective, you're betting on a trend, and it's nice to look back and see, hey, yeah, we were on the right track, right? Regardless
Right.
of how we got here and all the bumps along the way and all the issues we had to persevere through, but we were definitely on the right track, right?
Yeah. No, that's 100%. And we will get into the business side, but just to touch on the business side just a little bit, right? Because I think it's important, this film EFC, because it does shine a light on women's MMA. And I think oftentimes when people think of women MMA, they think of the Ronda Rouseys, the Chris Cyborgs, the Amanda Nunes, the real dominant women, especially Ronda. And I've seen, as a UFC fan, I've seen how the fan base treats women fighters. Not all, but a lot of them tend to look down on women MMA. And I think your film EFC helped change the narrative and change the direction on how people view it. And I think, we often live in a very male dominated sport, era, where, a lot of people consider like the LeBrons, the men as the greatest athletes. But there's a lot of women athletes, especially MMA, who are killing it. So for you, when you talk about the trends and, taking about chances on certain, trends and topics, was this something that you felt like maybe if you would have jumped on it, at the height of Ronda Rousey's, peak popularity and stuff, do you think it would have had a bigger impact, or do you think this was the right time because enough time has passed for her and also the UFC MMA to grow women's MMA?
I think that we're still right at the early stages. I'm not even sure our film will even hit a peak for another 3 years. So yeah, you're right. If we maybe came out with it back in 2016, I feel like it might have been too soon, just because it was slightly before that huge, media rush where everybody was like Ronda Rousey. You know, I mean, I'm sure you were watching back then. I'd go to places and I'd see women coming to watch UFC to see this woman called Ronda Rousey, and they didn't know anything about it, but they were there to cheer for her, right?
Right.
Fascinating movement to watch. So you're right. I do see the fan base gets a little sour on her, but I think what she did for the sport is just priceless, right? And even though we are where we are, and you've got some great athletes like Amanda Nunes, like what you're talking about, I don't think we're anywhere close to a peak. I don't think if you take movies and MMA and put it together, I don't think it's anywhere near any kind of ceiling right now. I think there's so much more room and so many more stories that could be told. EFC, for example, I mean, it, it's about women's MMA. That's the huge overarching theme, and you'll see the protagonist basically fighting for the future of the sport. So it's a little bit bigger than just like a fighter's journey, so to speak. It's a journey where they're fighting for the sport and the fighting for the future of the actual sport, right? And the biggest fight of all, even though the fight and stunt actions are great in the film, but the biggest fight of all actually doesn't end up happening in the octagon, because the future is on the line. So in that space, I think there's so much room for so many very different types of stories. Like if you looked at Halle Berry's film, it was a very different type of story than what ours was. But the space is so wide open. I don't think we're even nowhere near exhausting that potential yet, right?
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think that's the benefit of, your film EFC, because it's not chasing after Halle Berry's Bruce film. And I did, know more about, Bruce when it came out because she was using active UFC fighters, champions to be involved. So let me ask you a little bit, just to dive just a little bit into this. The business side of things, a lot of people often ask, directors, casting directors, producers, the people behind the scenes, how do you choose who to choose for these roles, right? You know, because oftentimes people get frustrated. They think they're right for the role, but they don't get chosen, or maybe a big name comes along and they get the role over you. So for you, when you looking at you know, even just regardless of EFC, but when you're doing a project, when you're doing a film, how do you go about choosing the role?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I know there's going to be a lot of people in the field potentially watching this, and I'll speak to me personally, and let you know kind of what I do. I pay attention to a lot of people every day along the way to the next project. So I'll see somebody that's interesting. You know what I'll do? I'll go on IMDb. I'll add them to a tracking list for a potential role in one of the projects we have upcoming. So, me personally, because I'm constantly keeping an eye out for talent, looking for interesting people, prospects here, prospects there, it's never really, we're not really waiting till we get there to start casting, right? Even though you're casting, you're filling in many, 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 many roles. But there are a lot of people that, myself, even my wife, we've seen, and we're like, you know what? Let's keep an eye on whoever this is because, hey, we have a production upcoming and we think they might actually be a good fit for a particular role. So we will, I mean, I guess you can equate it back to the old days where people would collect headshots and put it in a binder. But in 2025, all we got to do is go on IMDb, add a tracker, and we're constantly, they'll constantly be presented to us as they're doing stuff. There's updates, we get alerts. Oh, so and so's attached to this thing, so and so's attached to that thing. So you start to almost subconsciously kind of pay attention to that person's career, and then as the time comes, they're already in mind for certain things. Listen, maybe you don't end up casting that person for the role, right?
Yeah,
Uh, but there's ideas there, and there's things you're thinking about, like, oh, hang on a second, maybe this person could work really, really well in this other role we have here. So, and I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And I'll just go back to EFC right now. So the lead in the film, Carly Rose, she when I first met her, she came into the office, and literally she was moving to Toronto. She's breaking in on the acting scene. Before she walked in, and I got introduced to her, we were thinking about launching a different film that essentially wasn't really viable in the market, so we kind of scrapped it. But when I first met her, right, I had this thought, or the vision I saw for her was I saw her in these very messy kind of roles, right?
yeah,
And we shook hands. I said hello, and she took off and went wherever she went. At that point, I probably didn't speak to her for maybe a couple of years after that. But I had her in mind for other things down the road, and I knew they would be crazy, they would be messy, they would be wild, they would be everything except what you would normally expect to see her in, right? And so obviously when EFC came, it was the type of thing, like you'll see her in some of the fights get really, really messy.
yeah.
But it was really the next film after that, which actually we're releasing later this year, called Let Go. It's a psychological thriller. It was the craziness and the chaos that happens in that film with her character that I saw in her in the moment we met, right?
Right.
Uh, so when that film was being casted, I knew she was perfect. She was a perfect, perfect, perfect person for that role, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times for me personally, I'm just telling you, because you're an actor, and I know a lot of actors are listening, and sometimes sometimes you don't know who you're meeting,
Right.
you don't know what type of impression you're leaving, but it's really important sometimes when you're meeting people just to be a little genuine, just kind of be yourself, and just keep in mind, you don't know what's going to happen after that encounter. You might
Right.
someone like myself sitting there like, huh, I want to go put this person here. You never know, right? And of course, time goes by. Maybe you don't think about them, but the great thing about 2025, the great thing about technology is it's very easy to stay in somebody's field of view, right? So that might be a little inside tip that most people won't talk about because I know actors think about, okay, I got an audition. There's a casting director. There's a director behind that. There's a producer behind that. I got to get these lines, do this audition. But a lot of times they're like, how come I'm not auditioning for like significant roles, right? Like big, like leading roles and stuff like that. And I tell them a lot of times you need to get in people's field of view way before that, right? I think Honora just came out. That was a perfect example, right? I think that they
Yeah.
had her in mind for the longest period of time, just to play a role. And I can't remember how long he said, but it was an extensive period of time. And I completely understand him. And even with the budget they have, it would have been easy for him to go with a bigger name. But he had that vision of her in that role for so long. I guess he had to see it through, right?
Right.
So I think so that's maybe something from my perspective that maybe most people won't hear a lot about. But then again, if we're going to talk business, that's why it's good to make sure you have your stuff up to date. You got an IMDb profile. You know, there's a photo there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because just little basics like that go a long way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had that, but what I appreciated with you, I know you had a distinct look,
Mm.
right? You got a distinct kind of brand. Okay.
Yeah.
You're someone I would meet in person and you kind of stand out already. So it's a little so even if I went to go add you as a tracker, you're not really somebody I'm gonna forget. But I would easily go add you on a bunch of projects and stuff that we're looking at. Just because of the unique kind of look and everything else you have going on. So yeah, so some of the basics that sometimes I have to tell actors is, look, don't neglect your IMDb, don't neglect a lot of your branding. A lot of that is very helpful because it keeps you in the field of view of a lot of decision makers, right? I'm not saying you need to go do dumb stuff or like post crazy things, but just basic stuff, right? Basic.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that comment, and it's definitely a conversation I have with active friends of mine, my manager and stuff, and it's like I just had a meeting with an agent not too a couple days ago, and they was talking about this. They say, look, you have a unique look about you, and one of the things I'm aware of, especially when I lived in LA, it was kind of one of the things I remember a casting director saying. He was like, look, you got to find something to stand out from the room. When you have, for instance, you have 10 black actors in that room, how do you make sure you stand apart? Yes, the acting can be phenomenal, but sometimes that may not be enough to get you that role. So how do you stand out? And throughout that process, I started figuring out, hey, you know what? Why not try something new? Why not try something different? Go out go out the traditional sense, the short haircuts, keeping it clean cut, that type of way. And I think this leads to another point. And I want to get into the business side because you raised a good point about branding. Oftentimes, when I talk to other actors, whether they're established or starting out or where I'm at, right? I often talk about you have to find something unique about you and present it. And one of the names that always come up, and I shout him out always in the beginning, is Dwayne Johnson. I've had conversations with people talking about, hey, why is he always in every movie? Like some people feel like he's not a great actor. Some people say, he just plays himself in every role. But the key thing that he found, Denzel found his niche because I wouldn't even call it a niche. Denzel is just that great. But someone like Dwayne found that, hey, I have this personality, I have this look. Let me fall back on it. I'm getting paid a lot of money. Why should I change that to try to find other ways to make money? So let me ask you about that. how much important is branding is now than it was, 15, 20 years ago?
I think in 2025, it's probably way more important than it was 15, 20 years ago, because if you look at the industry in general, right? The outlets 20 years ago were very narrow. So you had to rely on your agents or your managers to get your profile just in front of the right people, right? And if you weren't in the LA area, good luck, right? Just even getting to that point. We're in 2025 and everything is wide open.
Yeah.
And you can maybe say it might be oversaturated, but it's wide open in a really, really good way, in the sense that, yes, you're going to have a lot of people that you need to work with as a team. You're going to have your agents for sure. You're going to have your managers, okay. You're going to have a publicist, fine. But they're just part of, they're cogs in a wheel. At the end of the day, if you as an actor, or whatever creative person we're talking to right now, for example, you're in the front, right? So
Right.
you have an opportunity to expand your reach, sometimes maybe further than those agents or managers can, right? So one of the reasons why I like what you did, a lot of times we talk to new actors coming out of school, and we sit down and we tell them, look, you have to almost decide what type of actor do you want to be. If you want to be a lead actor, you're going to have to brand and present yourself a certain way,
Right.
right? You're just happy to do roles and this is a hobby and you're having fun, and then you go off and do something else, and then then you know what, you can act and brand yourself in a whole nother way, right? So you need that plan. And in 2025, where you have the opportunity to have so much exposure, it doesn't take a lot sometimes, right?
Right.
Your branding is almost preparing you for the opportunity. You just don't know anymore where things can come from or how they happen, or what have you, right? So
Yeah.
you got to find your thing, um, whatever that is for you, and you got to run with it. I agree with you. I like Vin Diesel, Dwayne Johnson, Vin Diesel. Listen, I hear a lot of things said about Vin Diesel, but I laugh because he could be one of the most financially successful actors in the past 20 years. Probably nobody's given him an award, right? But but come on, he has something that works for him, a certain style, a certain look, a certain everything, and people keep paying for it. So great. Why does he?
Yeah.
Why would he have to change, right?
Right.
I like that whole franchise. I go there to see Vin Diesel too, in all his glory. I'm very entertained with those films. You know what I mean? And same with Dwayne Johnson. And listen, if people are paying for it, why would they change anything? Arguably, take all the awards away from anybody financially. They're some of the most successful, if you want to call them actors or performers in the industry. So they're doing something right, right? I know the contrast to that, where people say, "Well, you got to be careful. You might get pigeonholed."
Right.
Okay, that's a potential too. And then sometimes people rebrand to expand out. I've seen that happen too. But everybody's different, right? That's why you have to sit down and figure it out for yourself, right? I mean, I've heard even Will Smith talk about in interviews. That's what they did. He sat down with his team and said, "Look, I want to be a lead actor, but not just the lead. I want to be that lead at the highest level. Let's come up with a plan on how we're going to do it." You know,
Right.
no different for the actor coming out of school, uh, the actor maybe that's been around for a while, and even the guys at the top too. They're constantly having to adjust, sharpen, maneuver. You know what I mean? So you made some great points. I think actors in 2025, one of the things I recommend is they try to position themselves into productions way before they even start, right? Don't wait till you're getting an audition sheet. And some people say, what do you mean by that? Well, a lot of things get announced every day. Productions are getting announced every single day. We've already announced a few productions on our own. It doesn't take that much work to just go figure out, okay, what is this production? Who's involved? Where are they? How do I get a hold of them? 2025, you can get a hold of a lot of people. Um, People always, we get a lot of emails from actors saying, heard you doing this. Can you keep us in consideration for this next film you're doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? We don't necessarily respond to everybody, but we do. We do. We keep them in consideration for other stuff that we're doing. We have a pretty extensive list before we even call a casting director in terms of people, you can tag and move on that and so forth. Now, the other thing is that I feel like things are changing. I'm a different kind of director. Yes, I see you. I can see a lot of. I'll use you as an example here. Did you see Loki season 2? I think Jonathan Majors played
Kang.
Kang,
Yeah.
but before he became Kang, and he had a little bit of a nerdy kind of look, which was interesting. And I like the casting on that because I like going against the grain because they didn't cast, at least for that part, it was him before he became Kang. They didn't cast them because you look at him, a muscular guy, he could be the Black Thor or something, right?
Right.
They're very easy, but they put him in a very different type of a role than what you would have expected, and I really liked seeing him there in that role. But I would take someone like you, for example, and I could see you perfectly in that role, right? Most other people would say, "Oh, we could peg him. We can get him. Just put on a few glasses. We can get him to be this antagonist." You probably heard that a lot.
Yeah.
I would probably go the other way, right? So I know there's a lot of I feel like directors, casting directors, visionaries out there. They can see that potential. You just have to give them some stuff to work with. You know what I mean? Different looks. Again, 2025. It's not hard to do some clips or a one pager where you're dressed in different characters that you see yourself being able to portray, right?
Right.
Because others, and I'll go back to our lead in EFC. Um, I had suspected when she was coming into the industry, a lot of the casting directors would just look at her as the girl next door.
Right.
Like, wouldn't be considered as an MMA fighter. Like, are you for real? Getting bloodied and all that type of stuff. It's like, but then, and especially in the next role she has coming out too. So once people start to see you in all these different ranges, they start to have ideas. They can have a vision there of maybe what you can be. But I do think it does start with maybe the roles that you could see yourself playing, right?
Right.
Your dream roles, your ideal role. I mean, obviously, there are things, if I was an actor, there's a certain type of role I could probably do with my eyes closed. Okay. There are other types of things I could probably never really achieve. uh, and there might be things that I would like to do. But uh, doing the Joker role is probably not a role I would excel at.
Me neither. So
Yeah, but some people will, and some people really, really, really try to ascend to it. So I think you got to start with one, just understanding yourself and the roles you see yourself in, the types of roles you want to play, and then it's easy to project that onto other decision makers, casting directors, producers, and do it as early as possible, right? um, we get emails sometimes and people are like, well, I see this production and I read about a particular character that was discussed somewhere in an article or on a podcast interview, and we've literally had like actors like pitch us on stuff, which I think is great because we're in 2025. You don't have to wait for people to come to you. You could reach out, right?
Right.
So I'm all for that. Just people reaching out, um, and it's not just actors; it's all creatives as well. I'll go back to EFC again. Perfect example. You would think doing a women's mixed martial arts movie, the number one thing you would think about is who's going to be your fight and stunt coordinator.
Right.
Well, I never worried about it. I just always knew the right person would show up. We didn't even put a call out to find anybody. Never said anything to anyone. Just believed somebody was going to show up. And our fight and stunt coordinator literally reached out to me out of the blue, only because he heard through somebody that, hey, we were developing this women's mixed martial arts film, and he said it's always been my dream to, to do these fight and stunt choreography for women's mixed martial arts. So he got a hold of me. We talked before I even met him. In the first 30 seconds, I knew that was our guy, right?
Yeah.
And as you go into his background and experience, it was like a total no-brainer. But he had reached out, right? And that's kind of what I mean, right? Um, and it's not just limited to actors. I think it's everybody in a creative field, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by the advantage in 2025. It's not like 20 years ago where the access was more narrow and you had to rely on certain people to get you through certain doors. You know,
Yeah.
the game's changed.
Absolutely, it has changed, and one of the things I want to throw something at you in a little bit. Some, Anthony Mackie went viral off of talking about this, but before we get into that, I want to ask you, what is a director, right? Because I often get people, especially even other actors, they just think that all you do is direct movies. They think of Michael Bay, Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, and they think, hey, they're just famous for working with famous actors and directing movies. Now, I think as actors, the business side is the most important thing because you could be very talented, but if you don't know the business side of things, it's going to be hard to succeed. So for you, how would you define a director, and what are some things that you look for in actors, right? Because people think that just being a great actor is important, but I think one of the biggest things is coachability. But I'm not a director, so I'll ask you, what is a director for people, or just to clarify, what is an actual director, and what do you look for when you're looking at potential talent?
Okay, so I might take that back a bit because there's various types of directors, right? And we're talking specifically feature films where essentially that director is the one breathing life into that concept, idea, that production from start to finish. I'm talking about from the time you put the script in his hands to the time that it wraps post production. That person is obviously with a team, of course, but obviously you're following a director who has a vision to bring this thing that's written on paper to life, right? And within that, I think you have a lot of different types of directors. And I like to look at myself more as I'm more of a collaborator. I like to collaborate with everyone involved, all the creatives, the actors, the directors of photography, the whole team, to breathe life into something. But at the end of the day, somebody is steering that ship, right? So even
Yeah.
though you are co-creating with all these people, there's still one person with their hands on the wheel when it comes to that creative side of bringing it to life. Obviously, the producers have their hands on a completely different wheel,
Right.
right? And you need both to be in sync to actually get to the finish line. But essentially, you need the director there to bring that creative vision to life, right? TV could be a little bit different, but we're talking about feature films here right now. So for actors, I've met a lot of great actors, and all the actors I've worked with so far have been just phenomenal. One of the things I like seeing in actors, and for me personally, in terms of my directing style, I like to let actors actually do the work, right?
Right.
Because they're being casted for a role, and you're asking them to breathe life into this character, right? So sometimes, maybe just like a new baby that's being born, you know the baby's coming out, but you don't know what the baby's going to look like, right?
Right.
So when you start working with actors, sometimes it's like, okay, I want you to breathe life into this character, and let's see what this character is going to look like, right? So, so with us working with confident actors who have that experience where they can do that and then still make adjustments on the fly is great. But one of the biggest things I would say at the top of my list in terms of what I really look for in an actor is I like seeing the actors who are not selfish, but will do whatever they have to do to make their scene partner also look great. So there's two people dancing. If you are so focused on what you're doing and not necessarily the other person too, then the scene could still work from a direction point of view. You could fix it, but when you have actors that care enough for the scene,
Right.
uh, and they could almost help their partner dance with them and dance better, bring them up, elevate them while they're elevating themselves. You have magic there, right? It's magic.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautifully said. I appreciate that, not only just as an actor, but as someone who's, I always look at it as you always learn something new. And that's why I love having people like you on who are at the top, because you understand how the business works. And I think a lot of actors kind of forget that, hey, just because we're in front of the camera don't mean we shouldn't know the people behind the camera, because those are the ones that make the choices, not your fellow actors, right? And I want to run something by you though, real quick. Anthony Mackie, the new Captain America, Brave New World. I liked it, despite what the critics said. It's actually a good movie. Now, everybody's gonna have different opinions, but one of the things he talked about on the press release, he did an interview, and he talked about how parents and people lie to children about pursuing a career, whether it's entertainment or sports, but pursuing something very hard to get into, like entertainment. And one of the things he kind of talked about was like, it's not just about talent, it's about luck. Because look at his career. He's done so many movies, he's played a lot of supporting characters, and it took him up to 25, 30 years to finally become the leading man. Now, it's changed now where we're seeing people who might do one or two, student films or smaller feature films, and now they're getting pulled to do major roles. And I think one of the biggest things about this industry, and I've kind of seen this in LA, which I didn't like, was it seemed like everybody was chasing to be a movie star. Now, I'm not knocking that. I know I often people often think I'm full of myself because I look like somebody important, but I think if you love this business, you have to also understand it is a business, and you have to be real about how you approach it, because not everybody, and I keep saying Denzel, but I use him as an example because everybody wants to be the next Denzel. Everybody wants to be the next Kevin Hart or Dwayne Rock Johnson. But to get to that point, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot. And honestly, it takes a lot of opportunities and chances. When you're casting an actor, whether it's me or somebody else, you're taking a chance on us, unless you're, a name brand already. you're taking a chance. A casting director, when they send you an audition, they're taking a chance to look at you. And I look at it that way. Every opportunity is an opportunity for you to show your craft and show who you are. And I think that's the most important thing. So let me ask you about that. Do you think Anthony Mackie's comments is right? That is a lot more about luck than it is talent sometimes.
Um, I do agree with what he's saying because I know where he's coming from. But let me start off with this. When I was, I think, 18 or 19, I went to a motivational conference, and there was a billionaire talking. This guy became a billionaire in the financial industry, and he gave this huge motivational speech, right? And everybody was excited sitting there because they wanted to hear what he was going to say. Maybe he had a secret formula on how to win in business, right? Because you can apply what Anthony Mackie said to almost any business, right? Not just
Right.
show business, but you want to build cars, you could almost apply it there too, right?
Right.
But we all showed up to try to find out what he was going to say. How do you win in business, right? And I remember at the time I heard him say, if you want to win in business, it's going to take you 15, 20, 25 years. And I threw my hands up like, oh man, are you kidding me? I don't believe that. That can't be right. Like, come on, get out of here. This is like whatever year that was. I'm like, that was your time. The times are different now. I was thinking it's not going to take 20, 25 years just to do something successful in a craft, a field that you like. Okay, 25 years later, right? I can go back to that moment and I understand exactly what he's talking about because I don't think it matters what the business is. It could be the film business, whatever it is. No matter what you're doing, I think it takes, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but you have to hear this. It could take 10, 15, 20, 25 years to get to the level where you can generate that type of revenue, and we'll take it back to the film business, where you could actually sit there and be like, okay, this is my business. I'm making a lot of money. I'm comfortable. Now, everybody's path may look different, but just to accumulate the experience and the talent, the know-how, the people. Listen, Anthony Mackie is the Captain America, but yeah, he had a long journey. But guess what? I did like the movie, by the way. Uh, Fine. I don't know what people are talking about.
Yeah.
I was entertained. But at the end of the day, you take somebody who just came out of film school and put that person in his shoes, that production will collapse. They don't have that experience that he, and it's just to lead a set and to lead other actors, right? And to just be in that spotlight. So it takes a long time just to develop the skills, right? Just through trial and error and doing and learning and understanding. I talk to actors all the time. I said, look, it's great that you are constantly active in what you're doing. You're going to your scene studies, you're doing your courses, you're getting better, you're keeping your skills sharp. But I think I tell them one of the other things that can make you great is if you understand, again, how does a film set work?
Mm-hmm.
And camera angles, what the DP's doing, what the DP and the director are talking about, right? Maybe understand the producing side element, round off your knowledge so you could be a better business person in this field so you can position yourself in the types of roles that you want, right? So I believe the consensus is it takes time, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't want to hear it might take 20 years to develop the skills, the context, the know-how, the experience, the everything. And granted, some people might get a role and skyrocket overnight, but but it's not a guarantee, right?
Right.
I mean, there is that. So yes, he's right. It is luck, but sometimes you got to be prepared for it. You
Yeah.
And where does all that preparedness comes? It comes from all the years of just like doing it and studying, understanding, developing the skills, the experience. Um, I can tell you for me, when I had decided I was going to enter this sector, this space, the film space, one of the first things I did is that I said I can almost understand the business elements just because of my background. I could pretty much almost put it together, but I needed to understand the other side. How are these things made? What's the process, and why does it cost this much money and not that much money? Why are they shooting in this country and not that country? There's so many, 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 many questions that you had to ask. And even when I started to get into the industry, what I did is I essentially wanted to be on every possible set that I could be on. So when somebody asked me for something, hey, can you photo double for Bill Crosby at the time? I'm like, okay, but there's a huge age gap. Yeah, no problem. I just said, yeah. Can you come and do this? Can you come and wrangle background? Absolutely no problem. Whatever it was, I did it just to be on those big sets to understand how they worked, right?
Yeah.
And that's me in the background, just taking notes, observing, understanding. To me, I thought it was great because it's like people are paying me to be here to learn. So it was fine, right? And I did that for probably 4 or 5 years, you know?
Yeah.
And then from there was a plan. And listen, um, you mentioned earlier, you said EFC was like significant work to date. There were other productions, right?
Yeah.
Uh, just didn't make it out the pipeline. But a lot of the other ones that didn't work, when we got to doing EFC, they kind of prepared me to do that because we had so many challenges with that production, right? And there were so many ways to pivot. Uh, People commented to me afterwards. They said, "I have never seen a director so calm on set with so many challenges that you were faced with." And to me, I'm thinking, I've seen worse already, right? So all the challenges we had, losing a third of the story, the snowstorms, all kinds of craziness that would go down. For me, because again, actively working, we were doing other things. There was experience there to actually go on a set like that and actually get it to fruition, right? So I think, just like me, 25 years ago, I didn't want to hear stuff like, "Oh, if you want to win in business, it's going to take you 20 years." So when we talk like that today, I understand why people don't want to hear that because we're in 2025. Like, no, it shouldn't take that long. Uh,
Right.
no, I should be able to get to the top by next year. And I'm like, no, it's not going to work like that, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to put that time in, and a lot of times I find people just give up. They can't get there. They're frustrated, throw their hands up, they go do something different. And some of them keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. All of a sudden, boom, luck. Yeah, it was that level of preparedness when the opportunity was presented to the person, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I do agree with Anthony Mackie in the sense that um, in any business, um, listen, if you want to start a tech company and you're going through the venture capital route to get funding, a lot of that stuff is, yeah, you have to know people, right?
Yeah.
But does that mean that if I have something really good that I can't try? No, it might take a little bit longer, right? You got to break through a little bit more doors. You got to probably, run faster. You got to do more things, but it's not out of reach. Not in 2025. It's not out of reach. It's just going to take maybe a little bit more time. And as you're preparing for it, things happen. You meet people, introductions are made, things are going on, and eventually you either get there or you don't, right? It depends on the individual. So to one degree, yes, he's right, but I would apply what he's saying to every industry. And then after that, I would say, well, are you going to let that stop you?
Right. That's that's this is a loaded subject. It's a loaded question. And it's one of those things where it's like it really just comes down to you as an individual. And I think oftentimes one of the points that you made is I think people get failed because it's a business of politics. Let's just call it what it is. You have to rub shoulders with the right people. You have to be, someone that people want to work with. You have to show up and be prepared. You have to make sure your materials are on point. And that's why, one of the things I often see casting directors, I watched an interview with Sarah Finn and the Russo brothers. And one of the things she talks about when she sees new actors and stuff like that is, let me see you as a person. Let me see you when the cameras are off. Because one of the things I want to see is that where we can be here. If I feel like the energy is not there, if I feel like I can't work with you, if you're clashing heads, if you have an attitude of ego, we can't do anything. And then when you pass it on to the director who ultimately makes that choice, it makes them in a bad light. And now you got to make the tough call. Then the actor's mad at you. Not that it's going to hurt your career, but for the actor, you really have to understand that this is a business. Now, 25 years, do I want to wait that long? Absolutely not. But uh I've seen though in the last 7 years since leaving theater to TV and film now, it has definitely been something that I'm glad that I've taken my time on. Because yeah, when you're starting now, especially when you have training in theater and all that stuff, you think, oh, I'm ready for the big leagues. And I remember one time, this was 2017. I was doing background for HBO show John Voight. For people who don't know, Angelina Jolie's father. I remember he was. We were doing. I was background for underground boxing club scene, and the director said cut. So we're sitting around. They're changing the lights, and I go up to John Voight and I asked him. I said, I'm a big fan. And he asked me what I was doing. I said, yeah, I'm an actor. Just trying to learn. And he said, and I asked him. I said, what do you recommend I do? I don't want to do background for the rest of my life. What do you think I should do? And he said, you're in the right place. You have to pay your dues. You have to learn the craft. You have to understand the business. And you have to put in the work. You're not going to make $25,000 when you first start. You're going to have to do the free work. You're going to have to put in those hours of long nights, understanding how sets work, understanding how a film set moves, because it's not the same as a theater play. It's not the same as a student film. There's more money involved. There's more people involved. There's a lot more pressure involved. And it's not something you can just wake up after a couple classes and go and replace Denzel. That's just not happening. And so I, I want to touch on something. We could talk about this all day. You've been making a lot of good points, but I want to talk to you about something. This is a major concern, with the industry. And it might be different on your side, since you're in Canada. But a lot of people, especially in the union, are complaining about the pay. The pay is not the same. We're seeing even celebrity actors complain, "Hey, I'm not making the money I used to." But what's going on here? But one of the things I want to stay away from the money side, because we could talk about that all day. But one of the things I see as a common criticism is self tapes. Now, I've gotten used to them. I enjoy them. And, when I get in the room, it's weird because I used to love going in the room. Now I'm just kind of like, I like doing the self tapes. But a lot of people are complaining that self tapes has ruined the industry because, one, you don't get the human interaction with the casting directors, with the directors, the producers. More people have access to submit for these, and it makes the talent pool larger. So, meaning now you have more competition. But I say, look, everything changes, everything evolves, and you have to roll with the times. But I want to ask you, maybe it's different on your side. But is that a big thing, self tapes, and what is your opinion on that versus being in a room for auditions?
I think there's definitely no substitute for meeting somebody in person in the room. But at the same token, I think self tapes have been great because, first of all, when you start to audition for a role, as you said, you could have 100, 200 people. And a lot of times, sometimes maybe the director, the casting director, they may not be 100% sure what they're looking for, but they're going through tapes. And I know for us, myself, my wife, she co-produces with me. When we look at, and she prefers to look at all these audition tapes, that's more her thing too. I get a little drained from it, but sometimes you're looking for different things, right?
Right.
And I know specifically on our last film when we did EFC, there was, I won't say her name, I'll just say there was an actress that we casted in a small role. And it was specifically because she was going through the self tapes. And it's not that it was the best self tapes, and most self tapes I don't put a lot into. I'm looking for key things. I just look to see how professional is this person, right? Meaning, is the sound kind of decent? Is there some decent light? How much effort did they actually put into it versus not? So I'm looking for a little bit more things than maybe what people would be looking for. If they hit it out of the park for some reason, they did some kind of performance that was like, oh my God, wow, that's great. Never look for it though. Just looking for all the other things. See, is this somebody we should bring into the room to actually have a conversation with and then see in person what they're capable of doing? That's more what I'm looking for. But what my wife had found at the time is she saw an actress and she said, "Hey, take a look at, so and so. I feel like there's really, it was raw. You could tell she was newer versus some of the seasoned actors and how they auditioned. It was very textbook. They used the formulas, using the room, using the space. They did everything right. This one was raw, but she's like, there's something there. There's something there." So we never met with her, but we kind of, and she doesn't even know this, to be honest with you, but we kind of created the tiniest of roles just to cast her and see how she actually is on set for the future, because obviously we're working on other things for the future to see if she could potentially work in other things.
Right.
Uh, and post that, it's been interesting to watch from a distance to see how her career started blossoming, right? So the self tapes, I know people are negative, they're like, can't get in a room, can't shake hands, can't meet so and so they could remember me and I could stand out and this and that. But I think the self tapes are great because they do save time. That's a huge, huge factor. You can make an impression, right? People can go back to those things for other stuff, right? I think you just, again, the times have changed. It's just
Yeah.
utilizing it in the best way that you can to make the maximum type of impression that you can. And then from there, there's a point where you do get called in a room. You just have to make it through the first part now, right?
Right.
And not that, and let me say this, and not that it was the greatest thing before, because sometimes you have these auditions, there's 300 people there, and you get into the room and it's like, maybe you're in the middle of the pack, right? And these people are like, oh my God, I got to get out of here, we're so tired today, we can't. So there's that too, right?
Right.
People forget, just the human element of it. People get tired, they're fatigued, they're ready for the day to end, they just want to get through it. So sometimes you may do something really, really cool, but they're not quite seeing it, versus a self tape, they can come back to it, right?
Yeah.
Pause if they're tired, get back to it tomorrow, right? And they're looking at it from fresh eyes. So there's pros and cons to both, but it is what it is now, and it is a time saver for actors. It's a time saving saver for casting directors. I just think you got to put the best foot forward, and people do see things. They see, the level of commitment you have to creating it, to doing the tape, to the character. Those things speak volumes, even if you get the interpretation of the character completely wrong. You get a side, and again, I get it. It's like nobody explained to you it should be a dramatic thing, and they want comedy, or vice versa. Even if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter because a lot of times people are evaluating all the other stuff, right?
Right.
How serious did you take it, and how serious did you treat that role? The level of professionalism just in doing the tape and delivering it, so there's all those other factors that speak to the individual too, and who they are, that maybe sometimes goes unaccounted for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That 100%. I have to agree with that. And I look at it this way, and I remember, I hear this from a lot of people in the industry. The key for me at this point, whether you're in the room or self tape, is don't try to book the role, just try to book the room. Meaning, you want to be able to impress people enough that they keep calling you back, or even if you're not right for the role, they call you in for something else. And I think that's the most important thing, because we're not always going to be right for the role, even if we feel like we deserve that role. We don't make that choice. The people behind the scenes, the people who control the productions, make those choices, right? And I think, some things that we can't control is out of our control, but what we can control is our work ethic, our professionalism. And it's a hard industry, and we could talk about this all day, right? And I know you got self tapes to watch, so I'm not going to keep you all night, all right? But I want to ask you, you know as we get close to wrapping this up, because I know it's getting late, I don't want to keep you too long. But um December, you're in the audience, you get the best director award. What was that feeling like for you after 25 years from hearing that speech to now you're getting recognized for your work? What is that feeling like?
So that was really interesting because, for those who may not know what you're referring to, in December, we were at the 44th Paladino Doro International Sports Film Festival in Italy. And EFC was there, was nominated in maybe, I can't even remember, I think 7 different categories, including Best Feature, Best Sports Film, and Best Picture, and obviously Best Director. And I was sitting there because we had the cast and crew from the film there. We had a good team, and but sitting in the theater, it was a very beautiful, very old theater in Palermo, Sicily, and one of these very old like opera theaters, with the ceilings and just the plushness of it. And I actually kind of my attention got lost for a moment because I'm looking up in the ceiling at the balconies. The place is packed with people. There wasn't even an empty seat there, and I'm thinking, who are all these people, right? And
Yeah.
cameras everywhere, the whole thing. It was something just to kind of sit back and just be like, wow, this is like something, like whatever is happening here, right? It was a moment. So while I'm in my observation, obviously they're announcing this award for best director, which somehow I missed. I heard EFC, I wasn't sure what category it was, and so I was already a little bit lost at that moment. And they announced the winner. I guess somewhere in there they said my name, and I didn't hear it. But everybody's looking at me. I'm like, okay, why is everybody looking at me like that, right? They're just all like turn around looking at me, like nodding their head. My wife's like tapping me, like, I'm like, what are you talking about? What's going on? They're like, well, you won best director. And I'm like, I did? It took me, the moment was moving so quickly, I had to like try to catch up to it. I wasn't even sure how to get to the stage. And typically, my type of personality, I would have scoped it out ahead of time just in case we win, best picture. How do we get up there? I'm moving in the wrong direction. I'm trying to catch up with myself. I think by the time I got to the stage, they handed me a award. I had to say a few words. By the time I got to the end of the few words I was saying, thank you, I think I had caught up to myself, right?
Yeah.
So just it was like a little surreal in terms of the experience and what was going on, but it was I was quite honored to have been given that. It just wasn't in my mind at that moment. I was just more in the moment of like, oh, look at this place. My goodness, this is like, like something from like another era, and like these people, where are all these people coming from? And then all of a sudden, it was my moment uh, that I had to catch up to, right? So it took me a little bit to really process that. I think it took me a day or two just to understand the magnitude of what happened, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a big honor to get that, in terms of best director. It was the third one I had last year, but it was quite significant just because of where it was, and the festival and everything going on, our team being there, and yeah, it was just a great experience that will stay with me for probably a very long time, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. I think, some people chase money, but I think a lot of people chase accolades. And I think, especially in this industry, it's very competitive, it's very hard. And to be recognized for your work, you know, that's what I want. I want to be an Oscar winner. I want to see what it feels like to reach that status of, yeah, you are the man, and you are the man. And I think that's the beautiful thing, right? So, Jace, um let me ask you, as we close out, two, I'm gonna give you four options, but technically two each. Two directors, past or present, you want to work with that you haven't got the chance to, and two actors, past or present, that you would want to work with if you had the chance.
I think let me start with the actors. There are.
Denzel.
uh, I would like to work with Denzel. I heard he's retiring after a couple of films, which
Yeah,
we'll see. I'm gonna throw a name out there, and I'm gonna say Viola Davis is one. Uh,
absolutely.
just because there are, I have a vision of how she could be in certain characters. I think I have a long list in terms of past, present, but most of them are probably from a particular generation. So she's one. Um, I think that let's see, who would be the other one? I mean Denzel. Like I said, I'd like to throw him in there because there's so much I feel I could do with him.
Yeah.
But I guess I can, right? Even if he's retiring. Uh, Maybe if there's enough money on the table, you could pull him out, right?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I'm not trying to hint at your choices, but he might be retiring acting, but he'll be behind the camera. So,
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough, right? So um, he would be great. In terms of directors, I don't.
Denzel.
Well, actually, no. I'm going to go Christopher Nolan first.
That's fair. That's a good choice.
Definitely, he I think could be one of probably. Uh, I mean, in my opinion, uh, 20 years when we look back in time, I think we're going to look at him as one of probably the most talented and best directors of our time. Just his filmmaking style, you look at his work, a lot of the work that it doesn't, it's almost timeless. Some of his films, I believe. He has a very unique kind of style. It's almost like he's shooting almost these very creative independent films on very super high budgets, right?
Yeah.
Freedom to make it the way he wants to make them, right? So I think he's definitely at the forefront in terms of a filmmaker of our time. And Daniel Day Lewis was somebody, I know he's retired too. I would have definitely uh, just fly on the wall on his sets and watch him work. He's another one I would add to that list. I guess
Yeah.
that's for the most part. But yeah, the list could go on and on and on and on.
Yeah, it's I man Denzel. Funny story actually, and I know it's been enough time so I could talk about it. But normally we don't talk about auditions, right? But last year was one of the most coolest experiences of my life. I remember I was just done editing an episode for the podcast, and my manager sends me email and it's like, "Hey, you got an audition?" So okay, so I look it up, and when it's involving big names and stuff, they keep the details hidden. So all I see is Spike Lee. I'm like, okay, all right, this will be a nice project. So I research, and that's part of things I think for most actors need to do when you get an audition. Do your research to figure out what the project is, right? Because not to give any spoilers or anything, but to understand the tone, who's attached, what just to understand the core things. So I'm researching. I'm like, okay, I see that I have a scene, multiple scenes with this one actor, one character in the script. Turns out it's Denzel. I didn't get the role, but man, I was right there. I was right there. But man, he's definitely my favorite actor. I hate, I was going to ask you this earlier. I was going to say, who do you think is better, Denzel or Will? But I don't want to have that conversation. I've done it before, but I think they're just both great at their own right.
Yeah.
But I think Denzel for me, top number one choice. I would throw Chadwick Boseman. I was considering Will Smith, but there's something about Chadwick. He's another guy who, for me, when I think of great actors and people who chew up the scenery, he was another one that did that. Directors, I'll throw you on there, because I'm waiting for my role. All right, just throwing it out there. Okay,
IMDb.
yeah. I'll get on that. um, yeah, you know what? I gotta say, I throw. I don't know. It's weird because everybody's different, but because honestly, I'm a superhero guy. I gotta throw Zack Snyder slash the Russo brothers. Um, and I'll throw. Hmm. I was thinking Martin Scorsese, but I think I would probably do Michael Bay. I like. I know for my size, my skill set, what I will probably go out for and do will probably be more in the action stuff. I'm not a crier. I'm not about to win an Oscar for most emotional scene. So let's just work with the big blockbuster, directors at this point. But
My, Michael Bay's up there. He may be underrated sometimes, I think, but when it comes to like he's put out some really good stuff, right? So
yeah,
I've always been a Michael Bay fan myself, right? Um,
yeah,
Despite what anybody says, I've always appreciated his work. And what do they call it? Scorsese, the spectacle that he can create
yeah,
cinematically is just insane, right? So
yeah,
he's definitely on my favorite. And just a side note, I have to say, Denzel seems to be that guy
yeah,
everybody always seems to point to. Whereas um, I was influenced because I was on a set that he was on, and I saw this and his performance, and it just like took. I heard Terry Crews. He seems to be that one guy that seems to inspire. I hear his name all the time from everybody, every walk of life, and he seems to be like that guy. Like I see him doing theater now, Jake Gyllenhaal, which I think is great, but he just seems to be that guy that really has inspired a lot of people, like a lot of people, right?
yeah. It's I for me, I'm one of those actors who take the time to understand people's backstories, how they got to where they are. And Denzel was my early on inspiration. He went to Fordham. I grew up near Fordham. He was a garbage man up in Yonkers. And, he was theater trained. He went to the top schools. He put in the work. And to see not just a black man, but to see an actor who can, there's very few actors, and I call myself the most charismatic man, right? But I think that is not Denzel. Denzel is somebody who just, it don't matter what role he get, it don't matter how many lines he got, it don't matter what scene he's in. It just seems that he steals the show every time. it's one of those skills that it's a generational thing. I mean, not everybody's going to be in Denzel, and I think that's why he's so highly praised, because you don't see actors like him who are true actors who they can take any role and make it so where you remember that role, even if it's a small 2 minute monologue. He will make it memorable, and I think that's a skill that I consider myself a good actor, but Denzel, man,
Yeah, yeah, bow down. But listen, again, going back to earlier, Denzel, like, how long did it take, right?
that's
Uh,
true. Yeah.
I heard him say that Gladiator 2, which I like too, I really enjoyed his performance, was the biggest set he had ever been on, right? Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
And that was the big, in all his years and all the films and everything he's done, he said that was by far the biggest set that he was ever on. And I'm thinking, wow, how long has he been in the business? How many of these crazy big, $200-300 million productions have been done, right? And he's
Right.
the biggest. So it again, it goes back to time, right?
Yeah.
Doing the
Uh, yeah. Honestly, 100%. And I think it's a testament to the point you was making earlier. Times has changed. I said this before. It's Denzel grew up in an era where a training day can make a lot of money in the movie theater. Now, I don't think, I think people have fond memories and appreciation of training day. But in this society, in the movie theater, it wouldn't sniff anywhere the money it would make back then, because Marvel, the big blockbuster action movies, Transformers, those are the movies that everybody's kind of craving for now. And I think that's why Denzel's so beloved, because he reminds people of a time where it was just about the acting. You didn't need a major big set piece with CGI and green screen. It was just a guy who just chewed up that scene. And now, not to say there's no great actors, of course, we still got a lot, but I think it's just a different time period where those movies just they're not making those movies in 2025 and beyond. It's going to be the Marvel. And I think a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people, I know Martin Scorsese have said this many times, hey, superhero movie acting, superhero movies aren't real movies. But I do think when you look at Marvel's success, even DC, but Marvel alone, they've made way more money in a short amount of time than most studios have over 2-3 decades. And I think, you know, actually, you know what? Let me do this. Let me ask you, because there are people who say Marvel actors are like Disney actors, where yeah, they're great at their characters, but they're not necessarily great actors outside of those characters. How do you feel about that? And do you think superhero movies is not the future, because everything changes, but do you think right now that is what people want?
I definitely think the Marvel DC stuff, a lot of the film. Look at Avengers Endgame. I think they're very cinematic films that are telling really good stories. They just have characters that have certain types of whatever superhero powers, right? But I'm not going to take away from that work, because they're doing work at a very high level in terms of cinema. They're creating an experience, right? So you have to definitely give that to them. And I don't believe that, like, for example, Robert Downey Jr., everybody knows him from Iron Man. But he was a great actor before Iron Man. He just had a lot of issues getting back to the top. Like, but if you go back to his early work, he was always a really good actor.
Yeah.
And there's so many others that are great actors. They can take other roles, right? But I think we just recently, my wife and I saw Scarlett Johansson in Fly Me to the Moon, right? Played a very different type of character than what she played in Avengers, and great, killed it, no problem. I think the question people are asking is, yes, you look like you're bankable when you're in this MCU film, but when we take you out of there and put you in another film, the film doesn't produce the type of money that we saw in that MCU film. So it must be the character or the MCU brand or whatever it is that's actually
Yeah.
bankable and not the actual actor, right?
Right.
So, which could be why we have seen Dwayne Johnson in a superhero film. But hey, listen, I was entertained with Black Adam. I don't know what people were so upset about, but
Yeah.
I, I was entertained. I like work there. But essentially, there was a time where you could look at him and look at all the films that he made, and you can equate a number. Oh my God, if it's Dwayne Johnson, for every dollar we put in, we're going to make 15, right? You can almost bank on it. So the issue, I think, with a lot of the actors is they don't have that outside of, let's say, maybe the MCU. So I understand why some actors don't necessarily want to go there because they want to basically bet on themselves,
Right.
sure that their bankability is at a high place, and that's almost taking charge of their future. But again, there's no right or wrong either, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it goes so many ways. I think I saw an article the other day where they said Samuel Jackson might be the highest paid actor ever.
Yup.
Uh, and obviously, we've seen him in so many roles before the MCU, but he's had a string of 7 to 9 films there and has gotten paid really, really, really well. But he was a bankable actor before that, and I feel like you can take him out of there, and he's still going to be a bankable actor. So there's no one way, really. I think it's just the person, your brand. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And all those things, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of variables involved, and I always say like superhero movies is kind of what I'm kind of aiming for, not because of the status anything, but I just enjoy the genre. Now I would do any role, but I see. To be honest, I'll be honest. I've noticed that the people who are most successful right now in today's society, acting wise, are ones that are stars in Marvel and to a certain extent DC. You know, people often talk about the lack of movie stars now. We don't have, besides like a Michael B. Jordan and maybe Jonathan Majors. It's not a lot of big movie stars anymore. They're all older now. They're all either retired or getting ready to retire, and it's a different time. But one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the Marvel people, they're getting movie deals left and right. They're on Netflix, they're on Apple, they're on Amazon, they're in another movie on movie theaters. And I do see the criticism that, I'm not going to point out anybody's name, but I do see criticism of a lot of them who a lot of people say, hey, yeah, he was great at Thor, but outside of Thor or outside of Spider-Man, or outside of Iron Man, the acting is serviceable at best. And I don't think it's right to do that, but also see why, like to your point, I think people like Samuel Jackson, Christian Bale, who did I think it was Love and Thunder, Thor, and some of the other big names or working actors who have a successful career, they do well because they were successful before. People know Samuel Jackson before Marvel. Whereas a Tom Holland, he wasn't really known to the public before he became Spider-Man. So everybody judged him based off his Spider-Man performances. And I don't think it's right, but that's just the industry we live in. And I think, like you said, there's no right or wrong. I know, Denzel's calling me up right now, talking about why you keep mentioning my name. But I know you got I know you got a lot of projects that you're working on. And I know you mentioned Let's Go, a feature film you're working on right now that's coming out this year. And I also know you have another movie, Genesis, that you're currently working on. So before we get you out of here, get you back to Canada where you belong, let's talk about that. Like these are the projects you're working on. Anything else that you're working on that you want to share, or maybe just hit that, because I know some things you want to keep close to the vest until time.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Genesis because I like to say, everything we've been doing has been kind of building to that. At the end of the day, that was the film, or this is the film that I've really always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to track maybe my inception point to the time we do Genesis, you can almost clock 15 years, right?
Yeah.
That was always the film that I wanted to get to and that I wanted to do. And so Genesis is quite special. It is going to be it's a film about original thought theory. You know, it's set in a world where there are no more original thoughts. Every thought that could be thought has already been thought, right?
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
um, so we're exploring what that world will actually look like, but it is grand and it is going to be a spectacle of, I would say, Inception level. So that one has our full undivided attention, and as you mentioned, we do have another a psychological thriller coming out this year called Let Go, which, if you know Gone Girl with Ben Affleck, and you take Honora, put them together, that's what you're going to have with Let Go. It's a very tense thriller with a lot of chaos in it as well. And we're really looking forward to that one this year. So we do have a lot going on, and you'll hear us talk a lot about those films because they're up next. Obviously, on the future horizon, we have other projects that are in development too, such as Monopoly, which is a story about the collapse of the monetary system, right? What does a world with no money look like? I like to throw that question at people, like, and just so we get people thinking, right? So as you could probably tell, we do lean towards a lot of the more thought-provoking types of stories. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't enjoy Fast and Furious, right? Bad Boys. I can go from one spectrum to the other, right? Uh, but um, but yeah, so those are coming on the horizon. Just pay attention to that. Again, like Genesis, that's a little bit of ways, and Let Go is out later this year, right?
Yeah. That's amazing. And I can't wait to see Vin Diesel in your next project, dog.
Um, and listen, you always give credit where credit is due. When you look at those franchises and how successful they have been, and the amount of money they have generated, the interest in the fan base, you just like kudos, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're getting close to time here, but again, look at Fast and Furious. They started with a bang. A bunch of the films just weren't that great. The franchise looked like it was over, and
Yeah.
they brought Dwayne Johnson in to the whole thing around, right? I had one story that's kind of funny. We kept
Let's
bringing
hear.
up Dwayne Johnson a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tie this because maybe in the future, you never know how things work, right?
Right.
Where I learned what a lead actor is was on one of his sets. He was doing a movie called Tooth Fairy, and I kind of forgot about this.
Classic. I
Uh,
forgot. Yeah.
I forgot about this. I forgot that I was actually on that set. And I think it was a year ago. My wife saw something somewhere, an ad. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You know what? I had a call when I was in Vancouver because ABC Family, Disney, they were diversity and inclusion. They were having a little panic attack because they had this movie that they were doing called Tooth Fairy, and in Tooth Fairy Land, they needed better representation. So I got a call, and someone asked me, "Can you come?" And I didn't even hear what was said. I just said yes. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll be there. What do you want me to do? Okay, we're gonna call you later in the week. We need to show you for some costume fitting. I'm like, costume? Okay, great. Okay, yeah, no problem. Just yeah, because I was saying yes to everything. So I show up there and they're like, yeah, we're gonna fit you for this costume. I'm like, well, what is that? Well, it's a tooth fairy costume. Oh, and then I'm like, wait, you want me to be a tooth fairy? And they said, yeah, that's Dwayne Johnson. That's The Rock. Those are his wings right there. I'm like, wait a minute, he's dressing up like that too? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I got no problems with that, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. We'll go. And I went there on set and I was doing background there. And what was interesting was and I'm saying this because obviously I can say this as a fly on the wall. Um, I saw him, and this is where I knew or learned what a lead actor was, and that's when I knew he was a lead actor. There's a reason why he gets paid the money he gets paid, because he led everybody on that set. He took them up to like his level, and he moved in such a way where people, everybody, was happy to be on that set. Like they were just having a good time, right? He led all aspects of it, controlled the energy, controlled the attitudes, controlled the. It was really nice to watch him work. So I always said, one day, if you go full circle and you actually end up working with this guy, right? To me, I thought it would always be a great thing because that's where I learned what a lead actor was. How they operate, how they can lead other scenes, how they can lead other people, how they can lead the set, how pivotal they are to the actual like success of the film, the willingness to go the extra mile. I saw the total contrast on a different production. That's why it stood out so much to me. But I think a lot of times when you're not in the industry and you're not paying attention, you don't know those things, right?
Right.
And you don't see those things happening. But then that's why these guys get paid what they get paid, and a lot of that doesn't happen overnight either, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you never know. There might be a day where end up working with him. You're on set, and you guys have a scene, and he's doing a rock bottom with you, right? And and I get to direct that.
Yeah, right. It all comes full circle. And then Vin Diesel as the stunt coordinator. Right?
Yeah, we'll call Vin on that one.
Yeah, right. That's a wonderful story. That's crazy. And you know what? It goes to show because that movie has to be like 20 years old. And, look
Yeah.
where he is now. It's crazy to think that's him back then because he looks nothing. His career has nothing to do with that anymore. Like I said, I keep saying we're gonna wrap this up. I keep saying we're gonna wrap this
Yeah.
up. When the director says cut, you cut. But I'm not a director, so in order for us to end this properly, you gotta say cut.
All right, let's cut.
Yeah.